My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old. I'm a software developer. I live alone in a small apartment with my cat, Biscuit, a shelf full of books I actually read, and a life I built entirely by myself. No handouts, no safety net, no help from the people who were supposed to provide it. And 4 months ago, my father called me and said, word for word, "You will attend this wedding, Olivia. You will smile, you will show up, and you will be grateful. Or I will cut you out of my will, out of this family, and out of my life. Do you understand me?" I said, "I understand you perfectly, Dad." And then I didn't go. I need you to understand. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't pettiness. This was the end of a very long road. A road I had been walking, limping really, my entire life. Paved with conditions, ultimatums, favoritism, and the particular quiet cruelty that certain families specialize in. The kind that never leaves a visible mark. The kind where, when you try to explain it to someone outside, they look at you with polite confusion and say, "I'm sure they meant well." They didn't mean well. They never meant well. This is the story of how I spent 32 years being the invisible daughter in a family that only had eyes for one child, and how on a Saturday in September, I finally stopped being invisible in the only way that actually mattered. I stopped showing up. Let me introduce you to the Calloway family. My father, Dennis Calloway, is 61. He spent his career in commercial real estate, buying, selling, managing properties. He is a man who walks into every room and immediately calculates its value. That's not me being poetic. That is genuinely how he sees the world. Everything and everyone has a value, and that value is determined entirely by how useful you are to Dennis Calloway at any given moment. My mother, Patricia, everyone calls her Patty, is 59. She's warm, she's funny. She bakes the best lemon pound cake you've ever tasted in your life. She also spent 4 decades being completely, devotedly blind to her husband's behavior. She's not cruel. She just made a decision somewhere early in her marriage that keeping the peace was more important than telling the truth, and she has been maintaining that peace at everyone else's expense ever since. And then there's my brother, Brandon. Brandon is 28, 4 years younger than me. And from the moment he was old enough to throw a football in the backyard, my father decided Brandon was the entire point of the family enterprise. The heir. The legacy. The one the Calloway name was riding on. Brandon's college was paid for, full tuition, room, board, spending money. I was told the summer before my senior year of high school that there wasn't enough for both of us. Since I was the older one, the mature one, I'd need to figure out a plan. I figured one out. I took loans, worked 20 hours a week through undergrad, graduated with honors, and never once asked them to help me repay it. I finished paying those loans off last year by myself alone, the way I have done everything. My role in this family had a name, though I didn't learn it until my late 20s, the parentified child. The one who kept things running. Who managed the emotional temperature of every room. Who made sure Brandon got to soccer practice, helped him with homework, smoothed things over when tension rose between my parents. I was 12 years old and already functioning as the household's emotional manager. My father called it maturity. He called it something to be proud of. What he meant was, it's convenient that you require nothing. The thing about growing up the way I did is that you develop an extremely high tolerance for being treated as secondary. Each incident, taken alone, feels survivable. It's only when you lay them all side by side that the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Let me lay them out. When I was 23, just starting my first real job, I asked my parents for a $1,500 loan, just for a security deposit on my first apartment. My dad said they were tight that month. I borrowed from a friend, paid her back in 6 weeks. 2 months later, I found out my parents had bought Brandon a new laptop and funded a ski trip as a graduation gift. I told myself the timing was just bad. I told myself a lot of things in those years. When I was 26, I got a significant promotion, senior developer, a real raise, something I had worked toward for 3 years. I called home to share the news. My mother said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." My father said, "Great. Hey, while I have you, Brandon's thinking about quitting his job. What do you think?" The conversation pivoted entirely to Brandon's career indecision. My promotion was never mentioned again. When I was 28, I was in a car accident. Not my fault. Someone ran a red light, hit the driver's side of my car. I had a mild concussion. I needed someone to drive me home from the hospital. I called my mom. She said, "Oh my God, are you okay? Listen, we're at Brandon's place right now. He's going through something with his girlfriend. Can you call a Lyft? I'll come see you tomorrow." I called a Lyft. I sat in the back seat with a hospital bracelet on my wrist, watching the city go by, and I thought, not for the first time, am I making this up? Is this just how families are? I wasn't making it up. The moment things truly, irreversibly shifted was when Brandon announced his engagement to a girl named Kayla. I had met Kayla 4 times. She was pleasant. She laughed loudly at things that weren't that funny and called my mother Mom after 3 months of knowing her, something my mother absolutely loved, something I had been subtly discouraged from doing with my own serious partner at 25. The engagement party, the bridal shower planning, the venue tours. My mother took an entire week off work to go dress shopping with Kayla. An entire week. When I had my car accident, she sent a text. I started writing things down. In my phone's notes app, quietly, like evidence I was collecting for a trial I didn't know yet that I would need. It took about 4 months of wedding planning for the breaking point to arrive. The wedding was set for the second Saturday in September. I found out in March, the same week the save the dates went out, that my company's annual retreat fell on that exact weekend. Mandatory attendance. 3 days. My name was already on the roster. Missing it had real professional consequences. I reached out to my mom first, explained calmly, asked if the date had any flexibility. She said the venue deposit was non-refundable. I understood that. I called Brandon directly, told him I was so sorry, that I loved him, that the conflict was real, and I wasn't choosing work over him. I said I would celebrate with him and Kayla separately, whenever they wanted. Brandon was quiet. Then he said, "Dad's not going to be happy." He was not wrong. My father called me that same night. Brandon told me, he said, "No greeting." I explained the conflict again. Calmly, clearly. "Cancel it," he said. "Dad, I can't cancel a mandatory company event." Olivia. That voice. I had heard it my whole life. Low, flat, absolutely certain it would be obeyed. "I don't want to hear excuses. Your brother is getting married once. You will be there. I have a professional obligation that." "I don't care about your professional obligation." Slow and deliberate, like reading from a script. "I care about this family. And if you cannot make this family a priority, then I will speak to my attorney about my will. I will make it clear to everyone at that wedding why your seat is empty. And from that point forward, you and I are finished. Do you hear me?" The room went very still. I was sitting on my couch. Ordinary Wednesday evening. Half-drunk cup of tea on the coffee table. Biscuit asleep in the armchair. The sun going down in long amber strips through my window. Everything so completely ordinary around the edges of this extraordinary moment. And I thought, with a clarity I had never felt before, he thinks this is going to work. He genuinely thinks this is going to work. "Dad," I said, and my voice was very quiet. "I want to make sure I understand. You're telling me that if I don't attend this wedding, a wedding I have a documented scheduling conflict with, you will remove me from your will, humiliate me publicly, and end our relationship." Silence. "That's correct," he said. One breath. Just one. "Okay," I said. "Then I think we both know where we stand." I hung up, and for the first time in 32 years, I did not immediately call back to apologize. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and let myself feel the full weight of all of it. Not just the call, all of it. Every rescheduled birthday. Every surgery I recovered from alone. Every conversation that started with my news and ended with Brandon's needs. Every loan that wasn't available while money flowed somewhere else without hesitation. I let myself be angry. Really genuinely angry for the first time. Because I had spent so long staying measured, staying capable, managing my own reactions, that I had never once let myself simply feel what had been done to me. But underneath the anger was something else. Something quieter and more solid. I was done. The next morning I called my best friend Priya. She has known me since college. which means she has watched this family from a front row seat for over a decade, always with more clarity than I had. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Olivia, he's been cutting you out for years. He's just finally saying it out loud." I sat with that for a long time. Then I did something I should have done years earlier. I really looked at my own life, and I understood something my father had never bothered to consider. The will threat was designed to terrify me. But I had a good salary, savings, a retirement account. I owned my car. I had built my entire life on the assumption that nothing would be handed to me because my family made that clear early and I had believed them and acted accordingly. The leverage my father thought he had did not exist. I also called my grandmother, my father's mother, Nana Rose, 79 years old, still does the crossword every morning in pen, and the only person in the Calloway family tree who has consistently treated me like a full human being. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet, and then she said, "Your father has been running people with threats his whole life. Your grandfather gave in every time. He regretted it until the day he died. I never gave in. I never regretted it once." A pause. "Don't go to that wedding if you don't want to go, baby," she said. "And don't you let him make you believe your absence is what broke this family." That weekend, I wrote my father a letter. A real one, on paper, in an envelope, something he'd have to hold in his hands. I spent 3 days writing it. I told him I loved him. I told him I had a real scheduling conflict, and his refusal to acknowledge it said everything about how my needs had always ranked against Brandon's. I told him the threat he made did not have the effect he intended. I told him the door to a real relationship was open, but only a real one, not a performed one, not a conditional one. I mailed it Friday morning. The wedding was Saturday. I went to my work retreat. I'd be lying if I said that Saturday was easy. It wasn't. I sat in a conference room in Charlotte, participating in a workshop, and somewhere in the back of my mind I was aware that 200 miles away my brother was getting married, and my seat was empty. I felt it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But underneath that, steady, quiet, unmistakable, I felt like myself. A person who makes her own choices and stands behind them, not a person who collapses under pressure and spends years resenting herself for it. I texted Brandon that morning. Short and warm. "Thinking of you today. I hope it's everything you wanted. I love you."
He didn't respond.
I didn't expect him to. My father, true to his word, made his move at the reception. According to Nana Rose, who called me Sunday evening, my father closed his toast for Brandon and Kayla by remarking that it was a shame not everyone in the family could prioritize what matters. Several aunts and uncles looked around in confusion before realizing he meant me. My Aunt Carol said, quite loudly from her table, "That's a rotten thing to say at your son's wedding, Dennis." I did not expect that. I appreciated it enormously. He also called his attorney as promised and began revising estate documents. Nana Rose mentioned this to me with a tone I can only describe as serene and slightly mischievous. She told me she'd had a conversation with her own attorney recently, that she'd made some decisions about her estate that she felt very good about. I told her she didn't need to do anything on my behalf. She said, "I'm not doing it on your behalf, sweetheart. I'm doing it because I believe in rewarding people who make me proud." I cried a little after that phone call. Good tears. 5 weeks after the wedding, I drove to my parents' house. I had called my mother ahead of time. She sounded nervous, but she said yes. When I arrived, my father was already in the living room, seated in his big armchair like he was holding court. I recognized the staging immediately, the positioned authority, the deliberate stillness. When I was 10 years old, it made me feel small. At 32, it just looked like furniture arrangement. My mother sat on the couch. I sat across from my father. "So," he said, "you've come to apologize." Not a question. "No," I said. "I've come to have an honest conversation, probably for the first time." His jaw tightened. "You embarrassed this family. An empty chair at a wedding is not an embarrassment, Dad. What you said in that toast, drawing attention to my absence in front of 100 people, that was an embarrassment. You chose to do that." You forced my hand.
No.
I kept my voice steady and level. I declined to attend an event that conflicted with a real professional obligation. You chose to respond with threats. Then you chose to humiliate me publicly when the threats didn't work. Those were your choices. You don't get to hand them to me. My mother made a small sound from the couch. I have given you everything, my father said, his voice rising now. This family, everything I built, and you throw it back because of a work trip? Let me ask you something, I said. What did you give me, specifically? Walk me through it. Because I paid my own way through college. I took my own loans. When I needed $1,500 for a security deposit, you said you were tight. When I was in a car accident, Mom sent a text. When I got promoted, the conversation lasted 30 seconds before it became about Brandon. I paused. I would genuinely love to hear what you believe you gave me, Dad. I want to make sure we're working from the same facts. The room was quiet. His mouth opened, closed. You were always the capable one, he said finally. And I could genuinely tell that he believed this was an explanation. That in his mind, this settled something. I was capable because I had no choice, I said. You made sure of that. And then you used my capability as a reason to invest everything in Brandon instead. You got to have it both ways. A daughter who needed nothing, and you never had to feel guilty about giving her nothing because she's so capable, she's fine. My mother's hands were folded in her lap. She was staring at them. I'm not fine, I said. Saying those 3 words out loud in that room, to those 2 people, that was one of the hardest and most necessary things I have ever done. I haven't been fine for a long time, I continued. And I am tired of performing fine to make everything easier for everyone else. The way I was treated growing up, always last, always secondary, threats instead of conversations, it hurt me. And I needed you to know, that I see it clearly, that I am not confused about what happened. Silence stretched across that living room. My mother looked up. Her eyes were wet. I'm willing to have a real relationship with this family, I said. But only a real one. Not a performed one. Not a conditional one. Not one where I receive ultimatums when I make a basic decision about my own life. I stood up, picked up my bag. The door is open, I said. But it opens from your side now. I walked to the front door. My hand was on the handle. Olivia. My father's voice. Quieter. Different. Something underneath it I had not heard before. I turned. He was still in his chair. And for the first time in my memory, he looked his age. Tired. Human. Like a man in the early stages of understanding something he had spent a long time avoiding. I don't know how to do this differently, he said. It was the most honest thing I had ever heard him say. I know, I said softly. But maybe that's where you start. And I left. In the months that followed, things shifted, slowly and perfectly but genuinely. My father did revise his will. I don't know the specifics, and I meant it when I said I'd built a life that didn't depend on it. What I know is that Nana Rose revised hers too, considerably, in ways she described to me as correcting a long-standing imbalance. I told her again she didn't need to do anything. She told me she was 79 years old and would do exactly as she pleased. I said, yes, ma'am. Brandon and I are in a careful, tentative place. About 3 months after the wedding, he texted me, not about any of it, just a meme about a show we both loved as kids. I texted back. We have had a few phone calls since. None of them touched September. All of them were warm in that fragile, early way that feels like the beginning of something rather than the wreckage of something broken. I don't know what we'll be to each other, but I think we're both quietly figuring that out. My mother calls me every Sunday now. We talk for about an hour. She doesn't say much about my father directly, but there is something different in her voice, a carefulness, an attention, like she is trying in small ways to account for distance that built up over decades. I don't know if she will ever fully reckon with her role in all of it, but she is trying, and right now that matters. My father and I have spoken several times since that afternoon in the living room. The conversations are short, careful, like 2 people learning a new language 1 word at a time. He has not apologized directly. He has said things in the vicinity of apology. I know I wasn't always fair to you.
I didn't always see things right.
I accept those adjacent apologies for what they are. I'm not waiting for one perfect moment of reckoning. I'm watching for consistent behavior over time. So far, the behavior has been different. Slowly, imperfectly, genuinely different. It has been 7 months since that September wedding I didn't attend. Sometimes I still catch myself waiting for the other shoe, for my father to revert, for the old patterns to reassert themselves, for the warmth to curdle back into control. I think that's normal. When you've lived in a certain kind of weather for 32 years, you carry an umbrella even on sunny days for a while. The instinct takes time to unlearn. But something fundamental has changed, and the thing that has changed is me. I used to walk into every interaction with my family already shrinking, already pre-apologizing, pre-calculating how much space I was allowed to take up, which needs were too much to mention, which feelings were too dramatic to express. I did it automatically, a background calculation running constantly before I was even aware of it. That calculation is quieter now, less urgent. I catch myself in moments with my family thinking I don't have to make myself smaller right now, and I am still a little surprised by how simple that feels.
How much room there suddenly is.
The letter I wrote my father, I kept a copy. I reread it sometimes. Not to dwell on it, just to remind myself that I am capable of speaking clearly about my own experience without cruelty, without losing myself in the process. It is proof that I existed, that my perspective was real and worth the paper I wrote it on. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself somewhere in it, if you are the capable one, the forgotten one, the one who manages everyone's feelings at the expense of your own, the one who gets threats instead of conversations, I want to say this to you directly. You're allowed to have terms. Not cruelty, not walls, not punishment, but terms. Real ones. Conditions under which you are willing to be in a relationship. Things that are true about your life that other people must reckon with, even when it is inconvenient for them, even when it disrupts the version of you they prefer to keep. The opposite of unconditional love is not your boundaries. The opposite of unconditional love is love that is only offered when you comply. You deserve better than compliance. My name is Olivia Calloway. I am 32 years old. I have a good job, a good life, and a cat named Biscuit who has never once made me feel like a burden. I have a grandmother who does crosswords in pen and calls me every Tuesday. I have a best friend who has always told me the truth. I have a family that is slowly, carefully learning, some of them, some of the time, to see me as a whole person. And I didn't go to that wedding. And I would make that same choice again, without hesitation.